Good morning. Oop, it just went away. So there's going to be a little glitch here because when I touched this thing here, the whole script went away. So, actually no. So this is going to take a minute. I apologize. It was all set, and then when I touched it, it went away. This is the downside to tech things. Why don't we, actually, we're just going to have to be patient for a minute. When they tell you when you're a teacher, when you plan a lesson and it relies on tech support, that you should always have a backup, because when you do your lesson, it doesn't always work. Okay, now I'm into my email, so now I just have to click on it. Yeah, I've never had that happen before, but I touched it and it went. Okay, so like I do at school when my lesson fails, and I say, Mr. House, starting the lesson, take two. Take two. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. I am Peter House. My pronouns are he and him, and leading us in worship today are also Kitty Forbush, she, her, Theo Munson, she, her, on our music, McCormick Chu, he, him, providing tech support, Ezekiel McGee, they, them, Dwight Montague, he, him, and Karen Labraco, she, her, and our online ministry team. If you are here for the first time, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making it to this worshiping community. We have a visitors forum that can be found in the chat for our folks that are online, and which can be accessed by scanning a QR code in your pews or on the back of your order of service. Please fill out the form so that we can offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. Before we take a moment to turn to our neighbor, let us take a moment to turn towards the camera and to greet our online worshiping committee. Please offer a wave. And if you are online, please pop into the chat and offer a greeting. If you are here at First Universalist now, let us take a moment to turn to our neighbor this morning and offer a greeting. Good morning. That was the weirdest thing. Did you see it was all set and then I touched it and it went away?
Very well recapitulated. It's like
And I invite everyone to regroup now and let us sing together hymn number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Good morning, church family. I'm Kitty Forbush, and I'm your worship associate this morning. I'm not Elizabeth Osta. Sadly, her sister-in-law passed away, and she is in Syracuse with Dave for her funeral. So our love goes out to her and her family. Phew, life. What a journey. Ups and downs, plans and dreams, losses and gains, dreams fulfilled and plans squashed. but we are here. We are here to support one another and to share the love we feel for each other and for this community. This church is a constant in our lives that helps us to deal with all of life's changes, disappointments, and triumphs. So come, let us worship together. Will Grant Fish please come forward and to light our chalice? And as he lights our chalice here and you light your chalice at home, may we say our chalice lighting words together. May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. And now can you please stand in body or spirit for our affirmation of faith and singing of our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church, quest for truth in sacrament, and service with prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. The reason this physical structure survives is because of your generosity. But it's not just about the building, the ministers, the support staff, the programs, the music, MOCA, the fellowship. All First Universalist is and gives us. This is our church, and the sharing of our treasure makes it all possible. If you are here at church for the first time or the first few times, please feel free to let the basket pass. And you are invited to give online by scanning the QR code in your pews or to drop an offering in the offering basket. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give to the church. Thank you for your generosity. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I invite you now into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As we place stones into a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All online are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. A joy from Emma Berry that our congregation made it possible for her to attend the UUA General Assembly this year for the first time and in person. She is having a great time and is learning a lot and is so excited to be able to connect with her fellow UU admins while volunteering at the AUUA, the Association of UU Administrators, table there. She can't wait to bring ideas and new connections back to First Universalist and is so grateful that we were able to send her there. Thanks to the entire congregation. And I will just add, from a person who works in the church, Emma is an absolute gem and a treasure, and we're very lucky to have her. Another joy from GA, celebrating Reverend Vertus LeVar Robinson and Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan for their ministerial achievements and Reverend Sherry on her fellowship. The UURoc folks attending in person made a lot of joyful noise for them both. A sorrow. Our friend Don Friedenberg died on June 8th at his home in Brockport at age 92. There will be a memorial service on Friday, June 30th at 12:30 p.m. at the Heritage Square, 100 Isla Way in Brockport. He will be buried in Glenwood Cemetery in Geneva at a later date. From Patty Goodwin, Monday is 1 year in the Hebrew calendar of my husband George's death.
my husband's son, and our granddaughter, Atama, are coming today. I think I'm going to add this as a joy because it was just so interesting. I looked at my phone about 2 minutes before the service, and I had a friend request on Facebook from Eleanor Siegfried. So obviously it is some kind of a hack, but nonetheless, on my very first Sunday, 2 minutes before the service, I took it as a sign. So I wanted to make this a joy as let's all take a minute to remember and appreciate our dear, dear friend, Eleanor Siegfried. I think she would also find it funny and enjoy it. And we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. What does deep spirituality mean to you? Spirituality is impossible to define and difficult to describe. For many, it feels like connection to ourselves, to others around us, to the earth, and to all of creation. Creation to ourselves feels like deep peace, awareness, and calm, authenticity. Connection to others feels like compassion, community, acceptance, and enduring love. Spirituality is not an idea. It is an experience. When we experience connection, dividing lines disappear. Inner conflict gives way to integrity. The line that separates our individuality from others fades, and we become one. We find connections with our deeper selves in times of solitary practice and reflection. We find connection with others in community, often in worship. All the great spiritual traditions teach this. Today, the connection with creation, with the earth, and with the cosmos may be the most difficult. We live in artificial controlled environments that separate us from the natural world. More than humans in any other time, we live separated from the natural world, the world from which we emerged, and the world which sustains us. We so very, very much need to experience our world. We need to let go of controlling our world and to allow ourselves to become one with it. We find ourselves when we lose ourselves. May we connect, really connect, because when we do, it changes everything. Amen. I invite everyone now to sing together the hymn of contemplation, hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. This new technology is wonderful in that it enables friends to join us from a distance. It's a little more complicated to coordinate, and so please bear with me as I navigate kind of a new world where everything isn't done on paper anymore, although the sermon still is. So back around 1991, my friends Mike and Fred bought their first house. It was an old house. An elderly woman who owned it had lived there for, I think, about 60 years. She had gone into a nursing home, and her relatives sold the house to help pay for the nursing home expenses. So the house was what you might picture based on the information that I've given you so far. It was frozen in about 1947, with flowered wallpaper in every room, a clawfoot tub in the bathroom with no shower, and a gas stove in the kitchen, which actually stood on 4 graceful-looking little legs, and had a warming oven with a top on it like a roll-top desk. We've seen them in old movies, and some of us may remember them. They really wanted to keep that stove, but sadly an engineer determined that it was a fire hazard, so the stove had to go. The family left behind several pieces of unwanted furniture, all of which looked like it belonged on the set of It's a Wonderful Life, that late 40s era. Vintage 1930s and 40s pieces. I fell in love with a little chair, and they said that I could have it. Now, it was the kind of chair that probably hasn't been made in 70 years or more. Very small, with fully upholstered arms. It was a little tiny, fully upholstered chair. And I think its original purpose had been to place it in front of a dressing table. Remember dressing tables? And it was probably put there for the person sitting in the chair to fix their hair and their makeup. Or perhaps it was simply designed to be put next to the bed while putting one's stockings on and off and that sort of thing. But it was definitely, I could tell, designed for a bedroom. And like the wallpaper, it was upholstered in a dated but cheerful floral print. And most charmingly, over that was a custom pink slipcover, which also had an equally dated but yet cheerful floral motif to it. The chair was fittingly enough in the master bedroom, and it was given to me as a thank you for all of my help with their moving. It was well worn, but it was still functional, and I thought it was definitely me. Anyone who's ever been to my house can tell you that I love old furniture. In fact, there's hardly a stick of furniture in our house that was made after World War II. So I didn't mind the worn look of the upholstery at all. It would go perfectly in the shabby old starter home that my then partner and I had bought the year before. Actually, it did fit in really well. But I wanted it for another reason as well. Ever since a few years earlier, my friend Jim had reupholstered an old chair that I had given him when I was moving out of an apartment. I had been dying to take an adult education class in upholstery. I too could have chairs like this one that my friend Jim had done. This chair that Mike and Fred had given me would be perfect for this purpose, because for this particular class that I intended to take, you needed to bring your chair back and forth with you every week. And this chair was light enough for me to easily carry by myself, and it was also small enough to fit into my Honda Civic hatchback. And yet it was a fully upholstered chair where the arms were done and everything, so I could learn all of the skills that I needed to learn to transform this random sort of curb find into a treasured heirloom. So I brought the chair home, and I placed it in our spare bedroom, and there it lived for the next 11 years. Every fall when the BOCES adult education catalog would come in the mail, I'd briefly consider signing up for the upholstery class. But there was always some reason why I didn't. It would be on Thursdays when I have my choir rehearsal, or another night when I had one of the graduate classes that I was perpetually taking at the time. Or it would be a semester that I was so busy with these graduate classes I wouldn't have time, or I wouldn't have the extra money, or I'd be feeling burned out. As Rosanna Dana was always reminding us, it was always something. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. And so it went through the early 90s, the mid-90s, the late 90s. Then I went to Chicago for seminary, and the chair was still sitting there in the early 2000s when I returned to live in Rochester full-time. In 2002, my former partner and I bought a new house in Irondequoit. Still intending to take that upholstery class, I moved the chair from our old house to the attic of this new house, where it lived among a growing collection of items that I was going to use someday. When he and I separated in 2005, I lugged the chair with me to a new house in Cornhill, tucking it away in yet another attic. Who knew? Maybe, just maybe now as a newly single person, that upholstery class might be just the thing, just what I needed as a diversion, as a purpose. And maybe that chair, smartly reupholstered, might be a declaration of my new independence, proof that, like Mary Richards, I was still going to make it after all. But as many of you who have been through a divorce can attest, as a newly single person, I was lonely and vulnerable, and I found myself gravitating much more to comforts than to challenges. And so the chair continued to sit in the attic. When Michael and I bought our current house in 2007, it had the biggest attic that I had ever had. Certainly there was room for my chair there. Why, that upholstery class might be just the thing I need to do when I retire. And when I finally get around to it, I will be thankful. I will be so thankful that I lugged that chair all over Monroe County for 47 years. But something else had been going on those 3 decades that I didn't connect at the time at all with the chair. But as we all do, I had been learning about myself. I had discovered that I couldn't change the ink cartridge in our printer even after watching a YouTube video and then having a friend talk me through it on the phone. I had been a complete and utter failure in a neighborhood knitting class when I lived in Cornhill. So bad, in fact, this is really true, that about the 4th week, the teacher advised me to choose another pastime, saying to me, I have been teaching knitting 24 years, and I can't figure out what you're doing wrong. I would get like 3 rows, and then it would all fall out. I discovered that I am completely incapable of driving a nail straight into a plaster wall, and whenever I hang a picture, Michael has to do the nail for me because it won't go in for me. So in short, I am not good with my hands. And I am not motivated to anywhere near the degree I would need to be to truly overcome this deficit. So in March of 2020, when all of us were isolated in our homes, Michael and I, like so many of us, I'm sure, decided that this was a perfect time to sort and simplify and throw things away, getting rid of the countless items that we'd been hauling and storing and dusting for years and years and years, all with the intention of using them that elusive someday. So we discarded the tent that just needs a small patch to be as good as new, that we had been keeping even though we have never gone camping once in 17 years. We got rid of the strings and I mean strings and strings and strings of Christmas lights that just needed to be reworked. And I finally got rid of the box, a heavy box, of math education workbooks and dittos, remember dittos, that had been given to me by a retiring colleague in 1989. And then we got to my chair. the chair that I had been saving for retirement, when not only would I finally have the time to take the upholstery class that I'd wanted to take since 1987, but also that time when magically skills that I've never had any aptitude for will finally and inexplicably be attainable. And personality traits which have dogged me throughout 6 decades, several careers, and 2 marriages will finally miraculously just get out of my way. So I looked at the chair, still with its dated but pretty slipcover, sitting where I had placed it in 2007 under the eaves in the corner of the attic. The chair that I had lugged from Mike and Fred's to Bremen Street to Winona Boulevard to South Washington Street and finally to Laburnum Crescent. And I had a realization that this chair represented who I hoped I was, or who I naively believed I was or could become 30 years ago. And the fact that I had still never taken that upholstery class was a lot more. There was a lot more to it, and it was about a lot more than simple procrastination. I had never done it because I really didn't want to do it. I really didn't want to do it because I really didn't have the aptitude or the skills or the patience or the interest needed. I hadn't thought about this before, but wanting a nicely upholstered antique chair to sit in and to look at is a wholly different thing than being able to do the actual upholstering myself, or even to really wanting to spend the time working that way. I realized as I looked at that chair, forlornly sitting under the eaves by the strings of broken Christmas lights, that it was long past time to try to make complete peace with the person who couldn't change the printer cartridge on the printer, needed Michael to hang pictures for me, and had such a dismal aptitude for knitting that an experienced teacher couldn't even figure out what was wrong with me. And in order to make that peace, I needed to do a lot of letting go, and I would say, yes, a measure of grieving. Because the chair represented to me a lot more than a naive and unrealistic aspiration. It was a symbol of all of the peacemaking that we must make as we age. Peace with what never was, and most likely in many cases it never could have been. Be it children we never had, careers that never took off, romances that didn't stand the test of time. The longer we all live, the more things there are to reconcile. Few, if any of us, lived the lives that we thought we would live when we were 21. Every one of our hearts carry regret, disappointment, and grief. But the question I have this morning is, how much of this long ago imagined but never realized person still may lie within us? And how much does this never-to-be person still influence and drive the choices and the decisions that we make today? I have come to believe that the degree to which we find contentment and satisfaction in our lives depends upon how ready we are and how able we are to let go of who we thought we were and make peace with who we actually are, shortcomings and all. My friend Mark often serves as an example to me of how holding on to who you thought you were gets in the way of making peace with who you are. Mark is brilliant, and I mean brilliant. Definitely one of the smartest people I know, and unlike me, extremely good with his hands. He can fix anything. He's the person, by the way, who would talk me through on the phone how to change the printer cartridge, and I still couldn't do it. He could build a house or restore an antique car or take a cell phone apart and fix what's wrong with it. He has a quick mind and a knowledge base that seems absolutely infinite. He knows everything. He's also, by anyone's definition, including his own, a bit of a hoarder. And the hoarding all serves the same purpose, holding on to the whims and fancies of his youth. He has an entire room full of old computers that he will someday restore, a basement full of scavenged mahogany for the house he plans to build someday. And he parks outside of his garage because the garage contains the bodies of 2 classic cars that he one day believes he will restore. I recall the day when he got the first car body, a 1958 Chevy. I was a freshman in college at the time, so that tells you how long ago it was. And like my chair, this car body has moved several times with Mark over the years. For a time, he even had to rent garage space for it because he had a tiny apartment and there was nowhere to keep it. He chose the house that he owns now because it had a garage big enough for this car body and also for a 1954 Ford truck shell that he acquired in about 1988. By his own admission, he has never touched either of them. But again, like me in my chair, he just knows that someday he will get to this project, maybe when he retires. In the meantime, his house needs a lot of work. But the specter of someday always seems to get into the way of what is actually happening. It's been about 5 or 6 years, Mark complained to me that he was eating out all the time, that he had to. When I asked him why, he said it was because his kitchen sink no longer works. Now, as I have explained, Mark has all of the skill that I lack. I mean, he could fix this thing in an hour if he wanted to. I have seen him fix other people's plumbing more times than I can count, including many times he has fixed my plumbing. So why, I asked him, why don't you fix it? Because, he answered emphatically, that sink is from the 1950s. I'd have to use the wrong size pipe to fix it. They used 1 1/4 inch pipe in those days. Now they use 1 1/2 inch pipes. You know I'm going to remodel that whole kitchen someday. If I put 1 1/4 inch pipes in now, I'll have to replace it with a 1 1/2 inch pipe for the new sink that I'm going to put in when I remodel my kitchen. It's a waste of money, not to mention a waste of time. Well, you know how it is with friends that you've known a long time, and you know what you can say and what you can't say. So I've known him long enough to know that pointing out that he's owned that house since 1989, and he hasn't, to my knowledge, so much as painted a wall in all of that time, let alone tackle anything as ambitious as a kitchen remodel, would be a complete waste of time and possibly lead to an argument. Nor would I call attention to the amount of money that he is wasting by eating all of his meals out as opposed to putting a new pipe in the kitchen sink. Mark, who I hope I'm communicating besides everything else, is one of my dearest friends, and I love him more than almost anyone. But he is wholly driven in many ways by who he thought he was and what he thought he would be able to accomplish in about 1975. The mere contemplation of making peace with who he actually has become, I think, feels almost like a kind of a death to him. And I believe that there's a measure of truth about that in all of us. Holding on to our idealized selves may be a way of subtly staving off death. As long as that chair is tucked away, waiting for the never-to-happen reupholstering, or the 1958 Chevy restoration beckons, or the kitchen sink remains perpetually out of order in the service of a dream kitchen that will probably never be, then death can't claim us. Because it's not the person we actually are, after all, that death is coming for. It's the person we never were that someday, way off in the distant future, after all of these things have finally been accomplished, will eventually die. Making peace with who we have actually become and letting go once and forever of that never-to-be person that we thought or hoped we'd become feels like many of us, I think, as the ultimate capitulation. I think it does for my friend Mark. Is there a trade-off, though? Is there an upside to this letting go? Any reward for giving up on that which is highly unlikely to ever be? One of my inspirations for becoming a special education teacher was the book Karen by Marie Khalili. I just happened across this book in the school library one day, but it had a profound influence on my future career. Karen was born 3 months prematurely at a time when babies such as that rarely survived. It was 1941, I believe. And as a result of her prematurity, she developed cerebral palsy. After she was diagnosed, Karen's parents decided to raise her at home, contrary to the advice at the time that they should commit her to an asylum and forget her. So after visiting at least 23 doctors, they found one who taught them to do physical therapy with Karen at home, which was then a radical concept. They did so. They did it spending 2 hours roughly a day doing this therapy over the course of 10 years. Think about what a commitment that is. Karen did learn to walk with crutches. She could write, swim, and use her arms and legs. Yet the ability to walk, even on the crutches, came at a very high price. In order to maintain the muscle tone she needed to walk on crutches, Karen had to spend an inordinate amount of her time every single day on painful physical therapy exercises. She had to endure regular surgeries, which again were painful, and she had to sleep uncomfortably every single night of her life in braces that kept her legs stretched out sufficiently so that they wouldn't atrophy. And the older she got, the more painful and debilitating the effort to stay on these crutches became. And yet, for several years, neither she nor her parents ever even questioned whether or not all of this pain and all of this effort was worth the reward. When Karen was only an infant, they had, after all, set their sights on this goal. All of their efforts over 10 years had been in the service of this goal, that she could walk. To Karen and her parents, the ability to walk, even if only on the crutches, represented the ultimate triumph over the incredible adversity that they had all endured. It became important in and of itself, almost separate from any function or purpose that it actually served for the person that Karen was. Finally, in adolescence, facing another round of painful surgeries, Karen herself finally began to question whether or not walking on crutches really served her. After spending a good deal of time in introspective reflection, she came to the conclusion that she would be happier, more comfortable, and better served by letting go of walking and accepting full-time use of a wheelchair. As it said in Karen's New York Times obituary, after Ms. Khalili had experienced that freedom that came with using a wheelchair and decided that she preferred it to hobbling around on crutches, which she found to be painful, her mother quoted her as saying, and this was in the book too, I remember this, "No more will I be a drab, slow little sparrow that hops around with his head down. I'll be free, really free. I'll be an eagle with my face to the sun." Making peace with who we are may feel like a kind of death when we first contemplate it. If, like my friend Mark, we keep finding reasons to hold on to what never was to be, we may take some comfort from the familiar. But we are also closing ourselves off from so much which actually is. If instead we can open ourselves up like Karen did to the reality of who we actually are and what we're actually capable of, I believe that there is a great deal of freedom and joy to be had. Think about it, really. Think about your own life for a minute. In some ways, every undertaking is a disappointment in the making. Nothing ever truly lives up to the expectations that we place upon it. That is true even of our very selves. And it applies to everything that we do, all of the most important aspects of our lives: relationships, careers, experiences, projects. I think the key to happiness is to try as best as we can to make peace with it all of it, our failures, our shortcomings, our disappointments, and our tragedies. Death will come, regardless of how many unfulfilled dreams we are clinging to. And when it does, what will matter is not what we dreamed, but what we did. Not what we longed for, but what we cherished. Not what we wanted to be, but who we actually were. So let's just take a minute and do a little reflection. What piece of who you thought you were going to be are you still carrying? Is it serving you or your loved ones? And what do you have to lose by giving it up? There were actually 2 chairs in my attic that needed reupholstering. You heard the long saga of the first one. The second chair that we had was Michael's grandmother's, a winged back chair from the 1940s. And last year, I finally brought it down from the attic. I took it to Orlando, an excellent upholsterer in Shortsville, where I teach. He did a beautiful job on it. It looks great, it looks beautiful, and it is very comfortable. And as a matter of fact, I wrote this sermon sitting in that chair. It cost me $938 plus tax, and it was worth every single penny. I invite everyone to join now in singing our closing hymn, number 354, my favorite hymn, We Laugh, We Cry. Please remain standing in body or in spirit as we extinguish our chalice flame this morning. Let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. As we close our service this morning, I invite you to place a hand over your heart. If you are joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery view and look upon the faces here with you this morning. For those of you in this room, take a minute to look around at those dear souls who are here with you today. I would like to invite everyone to the refreshments afterwards in the Clara Barton Lounge. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to this world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving. And let the people of the church say together, Amen.